My name is Clara Jensen, and I am 32 years old, living in Hartford, Connecticut. Life had been somewhat predictable for me until everything changed last year. I had dedicated myself to my job in the marketing department of a promising tech company, working long hours and putting forth my best effort day in and day out. I believed in our projects and in the work we were doing. Each week, I would spend late nights brainstorming creative ideas with my team, hoping to help our company grow. I thought that diligence and commitment would pay off. I fancied myself a hardworking employee, someone who could be counted on during crunch time, but that all came crashing down on a fateful Tuesday morning. It was a day like any other, or so I thought. The air in the office buzzed with the hum of computer fans and quiet chatter as we settled into our routines, but there was an uneasiness that lingered in the air. It was the day of the quarterly meeting, a day when the fate of various employees lay in the hands of our upper management. I shuffled my papers, my heart racing as I remembered the last meeting. It had not ended well for a few of my colleagues, but I had hoped that my efforts would shield me from any impending doom. Suddenly, the dreaded news broke. A message flickered across my computer screen, announcing layoffs. My stomach sank as I read the email. They were letting go of employees, and despite working tirelessly, I had been one of the unfortunate names on that list. I felt humiliated and betrayed, as if everything I had sacrificed had meant nothing. The pain of losing my job stung deeply, but it was coupled with something much worse. I had an inkling that the decision had been swayed by personal relationships rather than merit, and that made my blood boil. In the same department, there was this guy, Jake, whom we all suspected to be a Nepo baby, short for nepotism baby. He seemed to live off his family connections rather than his own merit. Jake sauntered into the office at lunch every day, as if he owned the place. You could set your watch by his extended lunch breaks, which often felt more like vacations than work. He would collapse into his desk chair, snoozing away as the rest of us twalled like the diligent ants we were. While I struggled to keep deadlines, Jake was busy leaning back in his chair, oblivious to the fray around him. He rarely mingled with the rest of the team, sticking like glue to the people in power. It was obvious to all of us that he had connections, and it made my blood curdle to watch him get away with it. The head of our department, Andrew, was cut from the same cloth. He held a prestigious title and was often seen hobnobbing with executives, far removed from the lives of the employees struggling underneath him. To say he was intimidating would be an understatement. He had a reputation for laying off anyone who dared to cross him. This made the office atmosphere suffocating. Each time I saw him strut through the aisles, I could feel the tension rising, knowing how many livelihoods he had the power to jeopardize. It was hard not to feel despondent seeing someone like Jake thrive, while I had been cast aside like a broken toy. Filled with rage, I found myself spiraling deeper into despair as the days passed following my layoff. For a while, I wallowed in self-pity, grappling with feelings of injustice. How was it fair that someone like Jake could thrive on the perception of privilege while I struggled through the ranks? I often thought about how the universe works, and whether it would ever find a way to right the wrongs that had been done to good and dedicated talent such as myself. In a moment of fury and determination, I decided that I would not let this go without a fight. One evening, as I stared blankly at my computer screen, I remembered the anonymous whistleblower tip line that the company had established. I toyed with the idea of calling it, unsure of whether it was wise or just reckless. Was it worth the risk to expose what I perceived as unfair treatment? But the fire inside me ignited, and I dialed that number with a newfound sense of purpose. I outlined my observations against Jake, sharing details of his blatant disregard for work responsibilities, his absence while others continued their grind, and Andrew's complicity. That was my turning point. I had taken the step to find justice, or so I hoped. Time crept by agonizingly slowly after my call to the whistleblower line. I waited anxiously for weeks, expecting to hear news about an inquiry, hoping that my words would have some impact. I kept my head low, becoming a ghost within my own mind, and often I wished to return to my old days at the office. I felt strangely empowered yet susceptible, knowing that I had thrown a metaphorical rock into a pond, and I was desperately waiting for the ripples to return. 3 months had passed. Although I had started to lose faith in the process, one afternoon, I received a phone call that shook my bones. My heart raced as I picked up, dreading what might be revealed. It was a former colleague informing me of a situation that sounded like something pulled directly from a movie script. There had been another round of layoffs, and Andrew had been let go alongside a cluster of other high-level executives, all blindsided by the turn of events. I could hardly process the news. Andrew laid off with barely a week's notice. This was poetic justice, and it felt surreal in its timing. I could not help but smile at the thought of karma working its magic. It stung Andrew to hear that he had been cast aside in the same ruthless manner in which he had treated others. The irony was delicious. It was a sweet taste of validation that I had been yearning for. I never expected to find myself reveling in the idea of revenge, but there was liberation in knowing that I had contributed somehow to his downfall. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control over my own fate. Life after that was an odd shift. Months went by, and as I tried to stitch back together the pieces of my life, I found myself reflecting on the empowerment I had felt in taking action. Sure, I had needed to find new employment, but the byproduct of this entire experience transformed me. I was no longer the timid employee I used to be. I had found my voice, and it echoed powerfully. In an unexpected twist, as fate would have it, I got called for an interview at a different company, one that truly valued creativity and the input of each employee. Ironically, as I prepared, I felt more confident, having faced the harsh realities of corporate life. The timing of my interview was perfect, and I was determined to showcase the best aspects of myself. Each question felt like a new opportunity to express who I truly was, a far cry from the dimming shadows of my last job. Weeks passed, and the moment I had anticipated finally arrived. I received a job offer from that new company. Not only had I secured a position, but I had also grown exponentially as a person throughout the entire ordeal. Turning setbacks into setups for comebacks had reshaped how I thought about the industry. I no longer saw myself as a victim of circumstance, but as a warrior equipped to face challenges head-on. Reflecting on how the last year had unraveled, I realized now that my experience in the tech world had morphed me into a stronger version of myself. I had started to value my own voice over others' opinions, something I would carry forward. This newfound strength led me to even befriend and collaborate with former competitors, turning rivalries into partnerships that thrived on creativity. In my new role, I embraced the everyday hustle while keeping my eyes open for the signs of imbalance, reminiscent of my previous employment. I vowed to support those around me, to ensure that no one else felt the sting of being laid off unjustly, especially those who worked hard without the privilege of connections. It became my mission to foster an environment of camaraderie and respect, rather than one of competition and fear. Months rolled into a year since I found that inner strength, and I knew that while life could be unpredictable, I could handle it all. Karma had indeed dealt an unexpected hand for Andrew, but it had fortified me with resilience. I had learned that, while revenge may momentarily soothe a wounded heart, it is the act of lifting oneself back up that leads to genuine satisfaction. In the end, I closed the chapter on resentment and opened one filled with hope, purpose, and a strong commitment to ensuring that justice and merit prevailed in the world of work. My journey had come full circle, but the story was only beginning. I was no longer just Clara Jensen, a laid-off employee. I was a force to be reckoned with, embraced by opportunities that waited just around the corner. My newfound path represented a rebirth, a venture into a world where my hard work would yield fruit, not bound by the whims of privilege and corporate politics. The thought of what lay ahead held an intoxicating allure, and I was finally ready to chase after it with zeal.